the Ozal Beneg land. As they reached the top of the hills, Leonardo saw the wide horizon and the Ozal Beneg village from afar enclosed by a high wall. Nearing the walls, he saw what the occasional battles with the Zixes made. The war-torn walls had many arrows embedded on it and some were old that were still intact. Some sides of the walls were burnt and like the Malservia fortress, the walls had Ozal Beneg archers on top. Open the gates. When the gates were opened, Leonardo saw in front of him the Ozal Beneg guards, each raising their hand in closed fist, a salute to their general Dionat. Leonardo's face was still covered with cloak and each one was wondering who he was or what he was. Dionat and Calypso advised Leonardo to keep his face covered with his cloak through their entire walk and most of all while inside the Ozal Beneg village. Inside the walls, Leonardo saw before him a wide oval-shaped ground made out of bricks. In the middle was a very tall and skillfully carved statue of a figure. Its right arm was stretched out and was pointing south while holding a sword and its left arm carried a round shield similar to what the Ozal Benegs used. Its right leg was bent forward while its head and body turned to the north side. It was as if he was leading an attack towards the south. As they walked past the statue, he glimpsed at its face and saw its mouth wide open and its eyes were sharp as if giving an order to some soldiers behind. He was stunned seeing the entirety of the statue's face. It looked exactly like him. He glanced at Calypso with disbelief who anticipated the moment and whispered to him that was translated by Tatutida who was clinging on his back. He is Piccola, our god. The first time I saw you, I thought I was just dreaming or I thought I was dead seeing God before my eyes. But when I felt your hands, reality came that you are not Piccola. I wished you were. He then understood why Dionat and Calypso asked him to cover his face inside Ozal Beneg for they did not want a pandemonium in the village seeing their god walk past them. However, his odd-like look and presence still made some civilian Ozal Benegs along their way curious as they watched his steady walk with the soldiers. It was their first time to see a figure taller than the Reds. They entered a wide brick-laden path and on its sides were brick houses built the same way as the others. Ozal Benegs peered through the windows watching them pass by. At the end of the alley, he saw a high pyramid-like structure made out of stones, carved and engraved with figures of Ozal Benegs, Redfs, trees, animals, and Piccola, resting in the middle of an open space enclosed by living structures on its sides while the back end, of forest trees. There was a nice garden and some small and delicately cut trees on its perimeter. Words spread fast before he reached the palace that a huge and unknown kind had entered their walls. The king of the Ozal Benegs, King Didi, was waiting on the balcony as he watched the seemed giant figure among the Ozal Benegs and the Redfs. He disappeared and went down to his throne together with some Ozal Benegs clad in white clothes that were covered by silk red shawls, his advisors. He sat and waited for the visitor to face him while his advisors gathered round at the steps of his throne. Each time soldiers brought forth prisoners, visitors, other kinds or friends, he decided on their fate. Leonardo came in front of the palace where two Redfs were standing guard on its doors. Calypso ordered the soldiers to leave them and go back to their fortress. Dionat, Calypso and Leonardo entered the doors and inside the palace were life-size statues of soldier Ozal Benegs and Redfs lined up along both sides of the alley leading to the king's throne. At the sides of the walls were the palace guards composed of Redfs and Ozal Benegs and behind the king's throne rested the large stone-like figure of Piccola, also sitting but on a crystal-like throne. Large columns holding the high ceiling and its walls held on the structure. Calypso and Dionat led him in front of the king and as both approached him, they bowed down. Leonardo did not move and watched the king as he raised his arm with closed fist the same way as the soldiers towards Dionat and Calypso who did the same thing. Dionat then approached the steps, went to the king's side and whispered to his ears for some moments. The king intently listened for every word spoken by Dionat and from time to time, the king's eyes reflected questions and interests but his mouth kept revealing what his mind was thinking. He was keeping a close eye at Leonardo. When Dionat was finished, King Didi nodded and motioned to the Ozal Benegs in robes and the guards to leave them. His advisors were perplexed at the king's orders but none questioned him. Their trust and respect to the king was high since he came to the throne some 10 years ago when his brother, the king then, died of an unknown cause. It was not normal that when a visitor came that the king would be left alone by the advisors, more so, without the guards. When they were all alone, he motioned for Calypso to tell his story. Calypso explained to the king everything that had happened while the king fixed his eyes at Leonardo. When Calypso was finished speaking, Dionat asked Leonardo to remove his veil. He followed and took out his cloak as King Didi's eyes widened. He was stunned more than what he heard of from the two, for in front of him was the figure of their god, Piccola, in its flesh and blood. He stood from his throne and walked slowly down the steps onto Leonardo. He studied him from the front and back and touched Leonardo's big arm. He felt the reality that his eyes were telling him as he faced his visitor. You have the face of our god, and fate made us face to face with his image. Thank you for what you did. You must have been sent by Piccola to save an Ozal Beneg's life. Tell us what we can do to repay your service. Leonardo asked Tututita, who was in his bag, to translate the words of the king. He emerged, and like the others, the king was surprised at his presence. Calippo was quick to explain about Tututita, and the king was then amazed the second time, seeing two kinds for the very first time in his life. Before the Nuga translated the words of the king, Leonardo advised Tututita to tell his story first. He advised Tututita that it was the right moment for the Nugas to be known and gain justice against the twisted beliefs of the world against his kind for years. The Nuga told his tales while the king listened with great interest. The king believed the Nuga and made his apology in behalf of the Ozal Benegs in the past. The Ozal Benegs also joined the hunt for the Nugas before, believing that the myths against them were true. Though they found none, like the Zixes, bad things were blamed on them. Then, the Nuga translated every word Leonardo had spoken. I came from a very far place on my way to the Red Land and got lost in your woods. It is a great honor to be at Ozal Beneg, and you will do me a great favor if you can lead me to the Red Land. The Reds are our closest allies for years. We will take you there at the time you want, and you can both stay here with us as long as you wish, for it is a great honor to be with honorable kinds like you. Please, allow us to return the compliment, and our deep regret for our prejudices. The king was looking at the Nuga. Leonardo accepted the king's invitation, and Tututita was quite happy, for it was the very first time in his lifetime and for recent histories of the Nugas that his kind was received in hospitality accorded to by another kind. He looked at Leonardo with teary eyes, who understood what he felt as he gently patted the back of his thin body while giving a short smile. At the back of the palace inside the woods, Usti released a blue falcon. It flew in the air, moving to the south. The falcon was the courier of messages between Usti and the Malservius, and the same bird that carried precious stones to Usti. This time the message was asking for more stones. Usti knew that his message had great value to the Malservius, who told him to tell everything about their visitor. Though he did not see Leonardo, he knew that it was enough that Miro knew about it. He smiled at the thought of having more stones once again.